across the campus, across business. That's what the data culture is all focused on, and being able to use Tableau to help drive insight with more centralized platform for people consuming data and analytics and insight. So today's going to focus quite a bit on innovation, new features and capabilities. I'm going to introduce some of them, as well as I'll go through some slides, but really I want to spend the majority of my time doing some hands-on demos, showcasing the technology. So I joined Tableau right around version 6.1 when we were just starting out in kind of our journey in terms of being a leader in the visual analytics space. But since we got acquired by Salesforce in 2019, they've really accelerated a lot of our progress with capabilities that are more AI oriented. So one of them is called Ask Data, which was our first iteration of natural language query. Right? Think of I'm typing in a question and Tableau's rendering results back visually. But Ask Data basically was our first foundation, and we're already working on newer technologies using large language models and LLMs to be able to have more of a conversational AI assistant. We also integrated a lot of technologies that Salesforce had. So one of those being Einstein Discovery, which is more of an automated machine learning platform. Data Stories is really interesting. I'll show that in the demo, and then Tableau Pulse. So there's lots of kind of interesting capabilities that we've released over time in the last few years. And certainly as a Tableau user, oftentimes it's, well, I know how to connect to data and build a dashboard, but really how to focus on these features and how they drive value and inform decision making. So I did mention that we got acquired by Salesforce. So one of the things to think about is that ASU is a big customer of Salesforce as well. And so we brought our two technologies together, thinking about how we start to integrate those types of solutions, right? For our customers that use Salesforce, taking Salesforce data, building Tableau visualizations, the first thing was, well, maybe you want to embed Tableau dashboard back in Salesforce using like web components. I already mentioned Einstein Discovery, which is that automated machine learning platform that they have. Being able to bring in a data set, build a predictive model, deploy it in Salesforce, and then bring that back into Tableau. Next, Salesforce connectivity is another kind of key focus area. Being able to not just import data from Salesforce, but leveraging their new data cloud. It's going to be interesting in the future. External actions is a way to take a Tableau data point and do something in Salesforce, like an automation in Salesforce. And then the name will probably rename by the time it's released, but we're working on a technology called Tableau Einstein, which is basically re-platforming Tableau on top of the Salesforce architecture. So kind of interesting ways that we're starting to integrate with Salesforce. But if you're not a Salesforce user, don't worry, I have plenty of features and capabilities that you might take advantage of as well. So one thing I wanted to highlight, we talked about AI and how it's really important to have that strong data foundation, the data quality. So many of you, I believe, if you're a Tableau Creator user, right, or a Tableau user, it's likely you're now a Tableau Creator, so you can take advantage of what's called Tableau Prep Builder. It's a visual direct data preparation tool. There's lots of great partners in the space. Alteryx is one of them. Highly recommend checking out Alteryx as well. If you're a Tableau user, you might look at Tableau Prep Builder. Once again, it's about being able to connect to data, combine data from different sources, and ultimately output it into an integrated data source that Tableau can take advantage of and query and visualizations. In Tableau, it's a way to pre-compute some of those things in the data model, so it can help with performance. But once again, it's part of that creator license for anybody that uses Tableau as essentially a designer. Data management add-on is an interesting one. Unfortunately, it's not available on the Tableau server today, but it's three primary components. One is what's called Prep Conductor. So as users start using Tableau Prep Builder to connect to data, transform it, create those outputs, Prep Conductor is just the automation component on the Tableau server to automating the refreshes of the prep flows. Right. If you're in the data space, you know that there's just lots of tools and technologies, right? There's data preparation tools, there are data cataloging tools. And so Tableau really endeavored into, well, how can we help support all of our users and integrate all of those things together? And so the Tableau catalog is really focused on indexing all of your data and content in your your Tableau server. So you know that, okay, if I make a change to a table in the data warehouse, for example, I want to know downstream how many dashboards, reports, and users are going to be affected by that change. And having that natively integrated into Tableau is really useful. The next one is virtual connections. That's more around, if I'm in IT and I own a database, right? And oftentimes there's a lot of users that need that data, but I don't always want to give database credentials to a wide variety of different people. People change over, change different roles. And so being able to maintain the security of the data credentials at the Tableau server layer, I can then define, okay, for this credential, I want to select certain tables that I want to provide a user or group of users in the Tableau server. And I can do things like more of a centralized role level security policy. So based on the user, they should only see these rows of data. Those historically are maintained in a Tableau workbook, but this allows you to do it at a higher level in the data layer. There's other data enhancements outside of Tableau Prep and Tableau Prep Conductor and Data Catalog. One that's really interesting is data freshness policy. So when you connect to data in Tableau, you can choose whether it's a live connection to a database or an abstract connection to your data source. And what a live connection does is, right, it would query your database directly, right? I'm in Oracle, I load my dashboard, it would query Oracle, but oftentimes what happens is somebody logs into the dashboard, there's no guarantee that it's actually sending a query because Tableau server does caching. And broadly, a Tableau server caches data for 12 hours, right? So this idea of, well, if I ran my query 10 minutes ago, yeah, if I was the next person to log into that dashboard, it'd be great to have those results just immediately brought back to me without running a query for performance. But there are certain scenarios where you might need truly real-time updated data. I think of one of my customers uses Tableau with Oracle on live connection for like financial aid packagers, right? So they're on the phone talking to students. They need to make sure that they actually have the most updated data. So what that allows me to do is to say that, when this dashboard is opened, right, on the workbook level, I can decide, well, I want this to be always live. Anytime somebody goes to load the dashboard, force it to run a query, right? So you can train your users to hit a button on the dashboard that's going to rerun a query, but this is more of a policy level for the workbook itself to make sure that it's invalidating the cache and running a query maybe every hour. So you know that you're getting the actual real-time or updated results. The next data enhancement I want to talk about is incremental extracts with sub-range refresh. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but for those of you that are familiar with incremental extracts, the idea is I want to only load new rows of data into the extract based on something like a timestamp. So that's really useful, right, for performance. I want to just append in and add in 50 new records, every hour. But what a sub-range refresh does is say that, in order to capture any data records that were updated or changed in the database, most customers would have to rely on scheduling a full extract refresh, which takes a lot more compute to re-import all of the data, especially historical data that likely has never changed or hasn't changed recently. So this would basically be a way to say that, I want to append new data based on a timestamp, but I also want to refresh any data within 14 days or a month or however you choose to set that time duration. But it can ultimately keep a lot of historical data as it is and refresh only subsets, and that can help with the performance of the shared Tableau server refresh process. The next one is view acceleration. So I already talked. Oh, yeah. Question? Yep.
Is it similar to the type of dimension tables that we make in our database, which captures the changes that are happening?
It would be similar. Generally, right, if I have a table of data and somebody updates a record, right, it would basically detect which records has changed, or maybe it won't actually be which records have changed. It's just saying broadly, based on the time, we're going to check for updates within the last 3 months or 14 days. It's not necessarily recording the specific change, only update 10 records change, only update those 10. It's going to look back and find, within that time period, what's going to update those records without doing a full refresh.
But the set of records which might change, does it record the changes?
Yeah, I think it's based more on like the ID, right? Generally, a table would likely have an ID of some sort, even if it's not date based, to basically detect, okay, for the incremental, we want to be able to identify some column that's going to allow us to determine what's a entirely new record to ingest. So I would think that it would likely be able to still go back and say, go back these last 3 months and re-import the data. So I know I'm capturing the changes that would have happened in that time period. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's one of the newer ones. And view acceleration, once again, we're talking a little bit of, if you're a Tableau user, there's a concept called extract refreshes. When those happen, right, it's re-importing the data. And so a view acceleration on a dashboard is a way to say, when my data refreshes, it'd be great to also pre-compute the queries for my dashboard, such that when somebody logs into the dashboard, it's not having to run a bunch of queries. You can generally accelerate and pre-compute those. And hopefully that makes the dashboard for the user appear much faster. The next kind of area that I think is interesting is multi-fact relationships, right? If I'm a user with a data warehouse, right, I have lots of fact tables and shared dimension tables. And that's always been an area of Tableau where oftentimes it just required more data sources, right? You had a fact table, multiple dimension tables. If you had multiple fact tables, you're probably connecting to multiple sources of data or multiple tables. And then you're doing things like data blending in Tableau. So this really gives you a more comprehensive experience around, flexible data models and being able to certainly share those and kind of reduce the need for disparate data sets and data blending. Another new feature that's pretty interesting is called Viz extensions, right? If you're a Tableau user, you know that, right? Overall, Tableau is pretty easy, drag and drop, build some visualizations and dashboards. But there are certain chart types, especially if you go out to Tableau Public, right? There are certain, visualizations that because it's built on our VizQL technology, people can kind of manipulate it with calculations and data preparation to do some really interesting visualizations that Tableau really wasn't designed to do. Like create curved lines is not something that VizQL do. And so what Viz extensions is basically a way to bring in additional chart libraries essentially outside of the core Tableau technology. So something like this Sankey diagram, right? If I was to sit with you all, I'd probably have to spend this entire session reading the 17 different calculations in the knowledge base article to try to build something like a Sankey diagram, because that alone was actually not one chart. It's actually a dashboard that would be, multiple bars and then the lines and the manipulation. And so being able to do a Sankey diagram in a matter of seconds versus the pain that it always was. I never liked sending a knowledge base article to somebody and saying, good luck, it can be done. Or to download something off of Tableau Public and just immediately say, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. Reverse engineer it in Tableau Public to be able to do it on my own data. So Viz extensions is really interesting. Once again, it's more about bringing in like third-party visualization layers, but then having it present in a very Tableau experience. So we'll provide a demo of that. Data Guide's been out for quite a while. I really like it if you're a Tableau dashboard developer. It's a way to kind of augment your dashboard with additional context, adding descriptions to your dashboard and to each individual visualization in the dashboard, as well as it surfaces up useful information like which filters are in use, which fields are in use in the data set. It's also where we surface up explain data. For those of you that are not familiar with explain data, essentially what that is it looks at things like outlier detection, looks at key drivers, contributing dimensions, and surfaces those kind of natural language insights available to users. So it's a really kind of useful feature to kind of understand the why in the data. It is permissionable on a Tableau site, right? You can set it and turn it on for a site. You can turn permissions on for a project, right? There might be certain data that you don't want people to be able to have it detect, outliers and underlying data, and then you can also permission it as the user. As a creator, you can define, okay, only run explain data on these 5 fields instead of the entire data set. So once again, it's been in the product for quite a while, but it's now surfaced up in that data guide experience. Next is data stories. This was based on a technology acquired from what's called narrative science. They do a lot of natural language generation, more rules-based AI, right? Basically, if you think of, maybe you follow the stock market and there's certain stocks that you follow. Oftentimes you click on a link and it's pre-generating a bunch of text about that stock, right? What was the open, the close, the volume, all of those types of things. It's a similar concept of saying, based off of this data set that I have or this visualization, I want it to write some bullet points and insight, right? Things like what's the min-max average, but also what's changed over time. What are those contributing dimensions? And so this data stories technology, the start of natural language, is being reimagined in some other features in Tableau Cloud, for example, called Tableau Pulse. So I wanted to pause here, right? We know that ASU is a big user of Tableau Server. I would say the majority of our higher education customers are on Tableau Server. We're not retiring Tableau Server in any way, but I did want to just, for full transparency, these features that I'll talk about are only available in Tableau Cloud, which is our software as a service. There's many reasons for that. One of is obviously the amount of compute required to run some of the AI-oriented insights, as well as the pace of innovation, right? Generally, features like Tableau Pulse, which I'll introduce, is generally updated on Tableau Cloud about every 2 weeks because we're constantly innovating, bringing in new features, as well as the security of it just being on the Salesforce platform and some of the key components of how Salesforce communicates to large language models like OpenAI. So I wanted to highlight these 2 features, even if you may not be taking advantage of them immediately because of Tableau Server. So the first one's Tableau Pulse. It's many of you, like you're likely building visualizations and dashboards. You build this great dashboard, and oftentimes what happens, you don't actually control how frequently people log in and consume the dashboard. A lot of people don't have time to, really dive in and consume a dashboard on a regular basis. So this is more about setting up trusted, key performance indicators or metrics that you define, right? So if I'm in enrollment, I might be looking at the changes in enrollment by date. I want to see how that changes over time. It pre-generates these kind of sparkline visualizations, automatically does things like period over period comparisons, and looks and detects, various statistics around, top contributors and drivers of those changes in the data. And then most importantly, it's, really about how you scale to more users, more insight, where they work, right? Many people are probably not in Tableau Server every day consuming analytics, right? They might be in Slack, they might be in email, or they might be, a leader on their mobile device, right? So being able to have these quick, easy to consume metrics that you follow with some generated insight visualization is kind of where Tableau Pulse is really designed to scale insight to more users beyond the dashboard experience. And then I mentioned earlier Ask Data. Once again, that was our first iteration of natural language query. So being able to type something into, basically what we call in AI a prompt, but essentially it's a redesigned experience in web authoring where I'm able to type in and it will render a visualization. But maybe more important to that is, right, AI can do a lot more than just build visualizations, right? It can be specialized to help you with more of a conversational AI assistant to create things like calculations. But the nice thing is it's still in the full Tableau experience, right? If the AI doesn't return what I kind of expected it to return, I could easily drag and drop it and change and manipulate what the output is. Whereas Ask Data was a little more black box in terms of, okay, if I asked it something and it wasn't exactly what I wanted, I'd have to kind of tweak what I asked it because it would only render back what I typed in. There was less control over it. So that's Tableau Agent. But once again, those features are available as part of Tableau Cloud. All right, what time do I have? All right. So I did want to get into some hands-on demo. Hopefully, I know that was probably a whole lot of information really quick, but I wanted to make sure that I had time to do some of the demos. So wanted to go through the data guide, explain data, data stories, viz extensions, a little bit of multi-fact, and hopefully Tableau Prep Builder if I have time. Once again, if you do have questions, we'll be at the booth. And so I want to make sure I can get through the demo portion as well. Yeah, let me... All right, we're good. So this is a Tableau cloud site, but if you've ever used Tableau Server, likely you have the concepts of projects, which is where you publish up visualizations, dashboards, data sources. The first thing I wanted to do is just go into a workbook. So, as you can see here, right, simple visualization, highly aggregated data set that just looks at the number of degrees awarded by college and major over time. Pretty simple data set. You can see the data story here. We'll get into that in just a moment. But starting with the data guide, and I'll minimize the Tableau Pulse component. So once again, this is where a Tableau desktop user can essentially augment their dashboard with additional context. Oftentimes people will do it in terms of adding, a text box on a dashboard, right, as their primary place to provide context, but that can take up a lot of screen real estate. So basically it allows me as the analyst to just type in, right, this dashboard represents degrees awarded by college and major. It also does allow me to link to other URLs as well. So there might be, maybe you built a dashboard on a particular program and you wanted to add a URL about the web page for that particular program that the insight's about. Being able to easily kind of bring that information in. If I click on any one of these visualizations, right, it can update, right? I'm going to go ahead and just type in, this one is represented by year. It is useful that surfaces up information about the filters that are applied, right? Oftentimes there's filters in a dashboard that are not visible, quick filters that users can change, but it's important to understand that there is that context of that filter being applied, and then also what fields are in use in the visualization. And then lastly, we talked about explain data, right? This is a very high level aggregated data set, but essentially it's calling out that, well, there's a lot of bachelor's degrees in the College of Arts and Sciences. That's not maybe too interesting, but essentially it runs on the data and it can really maybe call out different things, right? Maybe if I'm looking at an average of a certain metric, I want to know if there's a certain field that's driving up the average, or in this case, it looks at the underlying data and the number of degrees awarded by majors. So there's 220 majors in the College of Arts and Sciences, but it's particularly calling out one that's a little higher than the rest. Looks like psychology in this data set is a little bit higher, right? Pretty simple stuff, but the interesting thing is it does, look across other, fields for top contributors, as well as you can kind of explore with some pre-generated visualizations. Say, well, if we excluded psychology for whatever reason, right, this is what the number would be if you excluded maybe an outlier. Okay, so that's explain data. It's been in the product for a while, but once again, it's surfaced up in that data guide experience. Okay. Well, don't freeze up on me. Refresh. Conference Wi-Fi. Let's do it. All right. So the next one is the data stories feature. So this is essentially a dashboard extension, right? Something that you drag onto your dashboard that effectively takes the data, in this case, this very large, crosstab of all the colleges and majors over time, and starts generating, rules-based insight, right? I want to look at number of degrees across 11 entities. Certainly I can control the narrative a little bit. But that's get added as part of the authoring experience. You would likely do this in Tableau Desktop if you choose to use the feature, but I'm just going to do everything in the web authoring experience, just so I'm not changing between different applications. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'll remove this one. And so once again, a dashboard extension is basically an object that you can drag and drop into your dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and select it. So the first thing you do is you just decide which of my worksheets or visualizations on my dashboard do I want the rules-based AI to write about. So in this case, I'm choosing the one called majors because it's a pretty dense table of numbers that really isn't something that is easily consumed by users unless they're looking up how many psychology degrees did I have in 2024. And so being able to choose which of my worksheets I want to write about. There is limits in terms of the number of fields, right? But this is a pretty simple data set that's looking at my years and my majors. And so I'll leave that. And then I can choose what type of narrative I want to write, right? So, if I was doing more of a scatter plot, like it would look for more like relationships in data between the measures and the scatter plot. But in this case, I'll choose discrete. I'll go ahead and click done. I'll resize it a bit. And you can see that it's writing a narrative about the total number of degrees over time, which years had higher numbers of majors compared to the others, what are some of the key drivers like nursing and psychology and law. So really interesting. And then as you select, different pieces of data, right? I've selected business administration. That's then filtered the lower visualization for the College of Business. Therefore, it's going to start writing only about the College of Business because it's interactive. It's rewriting the narrative there. There is some settings that you can go into. Common things like, how many bullet points or insights do you want? Are there certain ones that don't really make sense, like the minimum value, the maximum value for majors that maybe doesn't matter? I can remove those. I can also kind of define different terms, right? So it's in the narrative, it says across 11 entities. An entity is effectively a year in this scenario versus years. So I can update it so it kind of provides that. So there's a little more configuration of it, as well as being able to change and edit, which of the insights we actually want to display. But once again, it's natural language generation in Tableau. Okay. Let me just look back here. It's going to ask me to sign in, of course. All right, so we talked about data stories. The next one was Viz extensions. All right. Let me click here. Hopefully it works. Okay, so I already created one. A common visualization type that we'd run into a lot is, well, we really like a Sankey diagram, effectively a way to see how data flows, right? So this is an example that I mocked up based on another customer, right? I join a lot of Tableau user groups at my customers. I like hearing from the community about what they're doing with Tableau. So this one is more financial aid oriented for this university. It's actually Community Colleges of Hawaii, but they basically say, okay, well, we want to look at the students that we admit into our programs. How many of them actually, submit the FAFSA for financial aid? Who's actually awarded financial aid, and whether that has any impact on whether they actually enroll or don't enroll, right? Now, historically in Tableau, that would basically be a dashboard, 4 different bar charts. Each one of those little flow diagram curved lines would be about 17 calculations each, and you combine it onto a dashboard and you say, hey, this is my Sankey diagram. And now we can do it, much faster by being able to do things with Viz extensions. So let me click on new worksheet. Hopefully slowing down on me a little bit. Come on. All right. So I have my data set here. And so once again, Tableau has some of those standard kind of out of the box mark types or Viz types on the marks card, right? I want to look at line charts, bar charts, those types of visualizations. But then you'd click on, add extension. So right now, an extension is basically AI, and anybody could create a Viz extension. Right now, a lot of them are provided by various third-party partners that they make available. And then, you can go on to what's called the Tableau Exchange. It's kind of like a marketplace. It allows for, different database vendors who want to tune and optimize a connector for Tableau that our engineering team hasn't had the time to build a connector to all of the various applications and databases in the world, right? Those are examples are the Exchange. And so we'd click on the Sankey as the type. I've already added it to my marks card, so I'd click on Sankey. But what you'll notice is it now has different shelves in Tableau that are not actual Tableau, mark types. So I want to look at, for example, I want to put admit status onto level. Essentially, I have a count of individuals. And I want to look at admit status, FAFSA status as level. And where's it going? Oh, let me try to refresh. Always works in the hotel, and it never seems to work when you're in front of everybody. That's the joy of being an SER. Right now, we finally got it. Let's minimize that. Right, so now I can format the extension to say that, the formatting, right, it's done completely outside of Tableau. So we're saying, well, I want to make my bars a little wider because I want my, did it complete the FAFSA to hopefully fit, right? I want to create some, a little more padding between the levels. Maybe I'll go ahead and make that 25. Let's see if that looks a little nicer. And then I can add additional levels. So, admit status, did they complete the FAFSA? Were they awarded any financial aid? Put that on level. And then did they actually enroll, as an example? Right. But once again, I was able to do that in just a few clicks, where without it, I would have taken this whole entire session trying to explain it, and it's definitely difficult. So once again, things like a Sankey diagram makes it much easier to bring in to Tableau. Yeah. Yeah, so you'd probably just go in. You should be able to hopefully sort within the field, right? So I could swap based on the measure or the field, or does that make sense? You're just trying to say, well, I want this one to be on top of another one. How do I format that? Yeah, so that's how you'd change that. All right, the next one is more around our changes in our data model. So I'm just going to edit the data source, right? I don't have great, higher ed oriented data, but this is information about books. Certainly there's books in higher ed. Books will have many different things related to books, right? Books are rated, books are checked out, books are bought from the bookstore. So how do I bring maybe all of those things together, right? I want to know, are the highest rated books the ones that are checked out the most, right? Different types of questions that historically those would likely be separate data models that ultimately you'd be trying to blend those sources together. And so what we want to do is, for example, we have our ratings and our book, and I want to bring in the checkouts of a book from a library. So what's new is this ability to add a new root table, right? So I'm creating a new root table called checkouts. And then it's telling me, okay, I might want to relate that. So I want to relate that to my books table, right? Books get checked out. They have identifiers to them. And so I want to relate the ratings in the book. So it allows me to, if I was to drag and drop this in Tableau, I'd be able to bring in both ratings and checkouts together on the same visualization. And so it's based off of this concept of relationships that we've had for a number of years, but being able to have multiple facts and shared dimensions. So for example, I also have sales of books in different quarters. You can still do a lot of the things that you can do in Tableau today, like in this logical data source called sales. I can also union together my sales for my different quarters. So drag and drop those to union them. So now I have sales for the last 4 quarters. You'll notice that this sales data set doesn't actually have a book ID. It has an ISBN, right, which relates to something else. I think it relates to the edition of the book, right? So I can relate those. And then I could choose to relate my edition because that has the book ID back to book. So it gives you just a lot more flexibility in the data model, which is more aligned to a lot of the other solutions in the market. So gives you just a lot more flexibility, allows you to build a more comprehensive data model. And then just like Tableau Server, right, you can publish up a shared, governed, trusted data model that more people can then drag and drop and build visualizations in. Okay, so that's the multi-fact relationships with shared dimensions. Let's see, I have, it didn't sign me out and didn't give me my page. Where are we at? All right. We'll do Tableau Prep Builder really quick. So are a creator licensed user in Tableau, you likely have Tableau Desktop, you connect to data, you build visualizations and dashboards. People always love the visual, interactive dashboards in Tableau, but anybody who's been an analyst knows that majority of your time is making sure you're cleaning and preparing data for analysis, right? That whole concept of your output is only good as your data inputs. And so oftentimes our users don't always have the tools to clean, prepare the data for analysis. So we released Tableau Prep Builder, I think back in 2019. We've continued to invest in the product. If you've never seen it before, think of it as you have data inputs. Basically, you have your tables from all of the various connections, sources of data, very similar to Tableau Desktop. You'd bring in an input of the data. There's a number of various, common data transformations, right? I want a union, I want to pivot, I want to pre-aggregate a table, I want to bring in some R code, for example, to build my own predictive model, right? There's lots of things that you can do. But one of the most common is this concept of a cleaning step. What that effectively does is it looks at the table and all of the fields and gives you some visibility and data profiling of like, what's the distribution of records. I'm just choosing to use the kind of fictitious Superstore flow that ships with everything. I know it's not higher ed related, but, for example, you notice that, this is basically transactional purchases of various items. You notice that there's a discount of 17, right? Nobody's giving you 17 times your money for the purchase of this item. Maybe somebody typed something in wrong in the POS system. So being able to click on it and then it shows what is the affected record, right? And then I can choose what I want to do with the record, right? If it's anomaly or it's a test type of record, I might just choose to exclude it. But being able to do that in the data preparation phase versus remembering to always filter out those records on a dashboard or in the Tableau Desktop. As well as I could go in and say, I want to edit the value because I'm assuming that meant 0.17, right? Nothing's written back at this point to your underlying tables. It's just those changes are being tracked in your Tableau prep flow. And then at the end of the line is where you could ultimately have various, outputs, right? An output being a hyperfile, a CSV. If you're trying to use other tools, you could use a published data source to publish to the server. But once again, the prep conductor is that automation component, right? If I wanted to schedule this, saying, every night I want to go back to these sources of data, run all these various transformation steps, my joins, my pivots, my pre-aggregation, and run my output. That's where that data management, that prep conductor comes in. But as an analyst, creator license user, you can certainly explore using Tableau Prep Builder, at least at a minimum, create outputs. You can publish the flow. You just would have to run it manually in Tableau Server, which, automation is everything. But that's what Tableau Prep Builder is. And with that, I have 5 minutes. So anybody interested in what Tableau Pulse is? Curious, right? That's those key performance indicators over time, looking at basically setting up a metric definition. What is your measure, right? What are you counting? What are you averaging? And then setting it to a date. What it does is effectively then has these, usable kind of metric insight cards, which tells me, how a certain metric is trending over time, how it compares to a prior period, as well as some natural language insight about, okay, what are the top contributors to the changes in, in this case, the concept of alerts as kind of a Salesforce student success advising oriented solution. So that's what the fictitious data is. But basically, it allows users to follow the metrics that they care about. A user could then go in. So a creator user is defining the metric, right? Setting up that trusted layer of this is the measure, this is the date, these are the dimensions that I want to be able to allow users to break down the metric by, right? So I could break this down by status or by case origin or by severity, right? So these are all automatically generated visualizations and insight. So, kind of relying less on the analyst to build a dashboard that has all of these different components, being able to do that in natural language. And then users can choose, how they want to effectively update the scope of the time period, right? So this is looking at year to date, but if I'm an advisor, I might want to see how things, compare to, last week, right? So I can update the scope or the severity. I only care about, my high impact record alerts, right? And so I can go ahead and essentially save that as my own customized, personalized context of this one measure. And then I could choose to follow that measure. So I have this digest of all of these different measures that I care about that might span across dozens of dashboards. But more importantly than logging in and kind of seeing this experience, in the Tableau Cloud environment, is being able to push that out. I want to have an updated digest of all my metrics on a weekly basis. So I want to track and monitor all those changes over time of all of those metrics. As well as, right, Tableau is part of Salesforce. Salesforce acquired Slack as well. I know ASU uses Slack quite a bit. So being able to push those metric digests to Slack, as well as I think we just released an integration with Microsoft Teams for all of our customers that use Microsoft Teams for that type of channel experience. And then mobile as well. It's a great mobile experience, right? I'm a leader on the go. I don't have time to log in and view a dashboard on a regular basis, but I need to know how my metrics are changing over time. And that's really what the Tableau Pulse experience is all about. I know I covered a lot. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you can see, various capabilities that you might want to explore further and be able to take advantage of some of the new things that have come out in Tableau. There's always new capabilities that are being released. We always hope that all those innovations just add value to your analytics work, save you time, and hopefully share insight with more users to drive decision-making across the institution. And with that, I believe I'm right on time. Good. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I will be at the booth as well. So on break, whatever, feel free to come up and ask questions. But appreciate your time.